Cool. I believe this is probably favored for the Primeval Titan deck, huh?
Yeah, decently. I know that. Oh, sorry, humans, not red green. Humans. It's a white blue humans deck. But the Wolf Run Ramp player has a few sweet cards. We aren't working from deck lists this round because, in order to sort of maintain the integrity of the tournament, if for some reason Lewis ends up paired against one of these people next round and they decide to play, then we don't want Lewis to have access to any information about their deck list.
Makes sense.
So we are only giving him as much information as he could visibly see from watching the game over there. But you all get his insight, which is much better.
So I've been to tables all day, so I haven't seen the major decks playing, but are there any Wolf Run players playing Pillar of Flame instead of Galvanic Blast or more traditional removal?
Yeah, so Steve Mann actually played 2 pillars and finished someone off earlier today with Devil's Play to bring someone to 2 and then pillar you for the exact.
Sweet.
And there have been a lot of Wolf Run players just in general with varying amounts of Titans and Hunt Masters.
Definitely. Especially with the Wolf Run deck playing Whip Flares and Slag Storms in the main, depending on the build. The only cards that I can really see being problematic are Strangler Geist or things with Undying, so Pillar seems pretty strong in that deck.
Yeah, so Brian leads off with Cavern Naming Human and a pass, and then Moorland Hunt and Doom Traveler presumably off the top. Meanwhile, Javier has Sphere of the Suns, normal start. JVL and I were debating back and forth about whether or not Glimmer Post is any good. What are your thoughts?
I'm not a fan of Glimmer Post. I will say that on Moto, I have definitely lost to it once or twice, but more often than not, I think it leads to people mulliganing hands, which would probably be keepable if they were playing a green source instead of Glimmer Post. Also, it's really hard to play around Ancient Grudge Post board as a Wolf Run deck, because people are definitely going to bring it in. It hits your Spheres, your Solemns, which are blockers, and even Inkmoth Nexus. So when you have an opening hand with a couple colorless lands and Sphere, you can really get blown out.
Yeah. The Cavern named Demons. Oh, the second Cavern named Demons coming from the Humans player.
Interesting.
So we have a Cavern on Humans, a Cavern on Demons.
Wouldn't it have to be on Humans?
Yeah, no.
Mirror Crusader?
Yeah, no. It has to be on Humans in order to make the Mirror Crusader colors. So we'll make sure that everything's kosher. That might just have been a slight miscommunication from the table judge. But there should be 2 Cavern of Souls on Human right now, because otherwise that Mirror Crusader could not come down. Meanwhile, Javier whip flares the board and adds a Zenith for a bird, passes it back. And Brian basically just wants Hero here, right?
Yeah, I think so. Hero's really powerful in this matchup. Hero's actually the #1 card for Humans to be beating Wolf Run Ramp with.
Is it bad anywhere?
I mean, Hero is definitely still weak against Vapor Snag, the Delver decks, but looks like I haven't seen much Delver around today, so it might have been a good choice for the tournament.
Yeah.
I know, especially in the white-red decks that have been walking around, you catch people off surprise with the Hero plus Lightning Mauler, and there's basically nothing that can be done about it.
Yeah, that card seems very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm. I believe that Brian has a Honor of the Pure in his hand, which would be really good against the damage-based sweepers like Whip Flare and Slag Storm.
If only he had a way to cast it.
Exactly, that's the one problem with Cavern of Souls.
You kind of need a lot of Humans, or you need to draw an actual Plains.
Here comes the turn 4.
Oh, dear lord. Yeah, this... Oh, he gets to pick which Inferno Titan. 1/1 and you. That's real painful. Yeah.
I can't imagine a lot of things that the Humans can do at this point in the game.
Yeah, it's basically like Fiend Hunter. Oblivion Ring isn't an answer. Your Seachrome Coast come into play sideways.
Right.
Like, it's basically just Fiend Hunter, but little does Brian know that Javier has a second Inferno Titan, so he's just on no outs already.
Indeed.
Oh, we have a Glimmer Post.
Signature Post.
Gain 1, attack you for 9. I mean, he could attack him for up to 13 here. If he wants to deplete his sphere.
Definitely.
He might just attack for 10, play another Inferno Titan.
Right, yeah, especially when your opponent's playing an aggro deck, 'cause you don't have to play around Day of Judgment, so...
Yeah. If he's playing Tomb Traveler Champion, no real need to hold back.
Right. Without the Inferno Titan, without the second Inferno Titan, I guess Javier would still be open to 2 Phantasmal images, but once the second image, or once the second Inferno Titan hits the board, even the image is irrelevant at this point.
Yeah. And actually, unless Brian has an island, he wouldn't be able to get a second image because he doesn't have any plains or islands for an untapped Glacial Fortress.
That's right.
And he has more than 3 lands, so his Three-Carbon Coasts come into play sideways as well. So, Brian's mana...
Time.
Oh, apparently it's prime time now. Hold on, let me consider conceding. I'll concede. Yes. That game looked not particularly close.
No.
I mean, there we saw a rare example of sort of the downside of Cavern of Souls in a heavy tribal deck, right? Like,
right.
if you have a bunch of colored sources, a bunch of colored non-creatures, then sometimes you can have those stranded in your hand. Takes a rare draw to do that, but it happens.
How many Wolfrun, or how many Cavern of Souls do you think the Wolfrun decks are and should be playing right now?
Okay, so I think that the 6 uncuttable colorless lands are 4 Inkmoth, 2 Wolfrun.
Right.
And the way you built your deck was very, very good at understanding that because, like, you packed exactly enough Ghost Quarters to kill their Wolfruns.
Yeah.
Which is all that matters.
Right.
Because, like, they can't just beat you by, like, Nexusing you for 1. Mm-hmm. Like, they need to, like, Wolfrun a Nexus. And so if they fetch up a Wolfrun, then they can't use it that turn. So you can just, like, fetch up Ghost Quarters and get them.
Yeah. For those of you just joining us, I'm playing a mono blue Grand Architect deck that plays 8 clones. So the Primeval Titan matchup's pretty good for me because whenever they do, I do better.
Yeah, and if for some reason they're doing something that isn't as good as Wormcoil Engine, you just get to Wormcoil Engine more instead.
Agreed.
And then you have Buried Ruin to get back your clones and your Wormcoil Engine, so you get to Wormcoil Engine even more.
Right. Yeah, the mono blue deck was actually helped out a lot by Avacyn Restored. There's no Avacyn Restored cards in the deck, but other people playing Cavern brings down the total number of mana leaks in the room. So Wormcoil Engine's a lot easier to bring into play.
Yeah.
But so I sort of did like a second level thinking. You know, fewer people are going to be playing mana leak, so I can play
more cards that are bad against mana leak.
Right, without actually playing Cavern myself. So like along those lines, do you think that the Wolfrun decks should be sacrificing Cavern and play Glimmerpost in anticipation of other people not having counter spells?
It's actually a really interesting thought and level thinking. So Cedric Phillips wrote an article earlier this week, I don't know if you got to read it, but his argument was that you don't actually want Cavern main because the plan for Primeval Titan decks for the last while has been get to 9 mana to play around Mana Leak because Dissipate isn't a main deck card.
Right.
So you just beat Mana Leak by being able to pay for it.
Definitely.
And you can like ramp hard enough that that's a reasonable thing to do. And then when the decks tighten up post-board, you can sideboard in Caverns if it's relevant.
Definitely.
And then just like only pay 6, but it's uncounterable.
Even just swap them out for Glimmerposts against decks that aren't trying to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. And then in game 1s, when the aggro decks are trying to beat you down, your Primeval Titan still gains you 4 life and then gains you 8 life the next turn. And so that 12 life is like a big deal.
What's really interesting is against the Delver deck, when they're playing a very aggressive deck with Mana Leaks and Vapor Snags, like, what do? You really need the Glimmerpost and the Cavern of Souls.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The mana base really falls apart there.
And like we saw earlier, Steve Mann had 11 colorless lands. He had 3 Inkmoth, 2 Wolfrun, 4 Glimmerpost, and 2 Cavern, I think. Yeah. So 11 colorless lands. And then he just had to keep a hand that had like 3 colorless lands, Rampant Growth, Solemn Simulacrum, and Primeval Titan.
Definitely.
Because he's just like, well, I need to...
If I ever draw a green source.
Yeah, if I ever draw a green source, then I have a turn 4 Titan, which is like what my deck needs to do. I can't really mulligan this hand that has like lands, ramp spells, and Titans.
Did
like,
he get there?
No, of course not.
Okay. Yeah, I remember during the Valakut days, like a major rule was if there's no green source, do not keep the hand.
You can never keep it.
Right, and now people are playing more colorless lands, and they're expecting to regularly curve out into like green spell, turn 3 Slag Storm, like double red, double green. So.
And like the sickest part of the Valakut deck is that it was literally a mono green ramp deck with a bunch of mountains. Yep. So like all of the mountains in Valakuts were basically colorless sources, and people would still somehow think that like keeping Valakut Mountain was like a reasonable thing to do with like Rampant Growth, Cultivate, Primeval Titan.
Yeah.
Or like they got spreading seized when they like peeled their forest and they died.
Yep.
I mean, your deck selection was also really good because if more people are playing Cavern of Souls, then more people are playing like Tribal Linears, which Wormcoil Engine is also very good against.
Yeah.
So like,
I was playing against the Red White Humans deck, and I'm thinking at some point, you know, he plays a lot of really good creatures in his deck. At which point I realized with 8 clones, I get really good creatures too.
Yeah.
I had an image on Silverblade Paladin, and he attacked me with a bunch of stuff, and I was able to flash into Snapcaster Mage on Snag and take away his double strike and give my team double strike.
Oh, that seems real nice.
Yeah. So it looks like Brian started off with an Honor of the Pure, which is pretty good if his opponent is holding some Whip Flares.
Yeah. Matched by Rampant Growth on the other side, and it looks like Brian's actually going to be able to cast his spells this game, which is, you know, is nice.
Yeah.
Javier gets a Mountain, which is not... I guess he has to have Inferno Titan, right? He already has red for Slag Storm.
Right.
So, like, he's pretty much telegraphing Inferno Titan here.
Or he could have Whip Flare, Slag Storm.
Whip Flare, Slag Storm, I guess. Yeah, he's going to need to Slag Storm just this Geist, because otherwise he just takes 8 a turn.
Definitely. He definitely has both the Whip Flares in his hand. It's interesting. He might actually pull the trigger now, but it's terrifying. From Brian's perspective, he needs to have pressure because once Javier starts playing Titans, it's not looking great for him.
Yeah.
Especially with the blue-white deck. It's more traditional. It doesn't have Zealous Conscripts, which is one of the biggest upsides of the red-white deck.
Right.
With the turn 2 Honor the Pure is interesting too. Like one of the most important things is to have early pressure, like a champion on turn 1 against Wolf Run.
So like no 1-drop and no 2-drop that attacks. Like you kind of really need this Geist to survive.
Right. Based on the hand he kept, I guess you can almost assume that he might have a Hero Blade Hold in his hand.
Yeah. Or he might just have like a bunch of Oblivion Rings on backup. Ooh, another Honor, and is that a Divine Offering? It might be.
Front card looks like a Leonin Relic Order, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, Oblivion Ring makes sense in this hand.
Yeah.
And then he can just send Geist in.
For approximately $1 million.
Yeah. Gets the Angel. 5/5 Angel, 3/3 Geist. So Huntmaster brought Javier to 22, made a wolf, and I assume the wolf doesn't chump here because he can just add anything else to the board and double block to take down Geist.
So he's probably planning to Whip Flare, Slag Storm, do something to get rid of the Geist on his turn since Brian doesn't have anything else right now.
Yeah, the fact that he chumped is a pretty big tell on the sweeper. So he takes 5 from the Angel, boosted by Honor of the Pure, goes to 17. I'm expecting double Whip Flare here.
Here it comes.
Yep.
Two for one yourself obviously isn't ideal, but like we said, Javier is just trying to get to 6 mana, at which point he can take over the game with big dudes.
Yeah.
Silverblade Paladin, Honor of the Pure, and something in his hand? Maybe a Mirror Crusader?
Yeah, that's a Mirror Crusader. And another Honor. So he's got a 4/4 Mirror Crusader, which is
really
pretty good.
Big. Yeah, it brings it out of range of Slag Storm, which is really huge.
Yeah, and Inferno Titan. Which...
Looks like Javier actually drew the Slag Storm for turn.
Oh, jeez. Just in time.
Yeah. If he'd had it last turn, he could have taken care of the Geist with just that one card and had both the Whip Flares for the Mirror Crusader.
Yeah.
It's a good example of drawing your cards out of order.
Yeah. I mean, that is one of the problems with Ramp, is just like, nope, drew the wrong cards, wrong turns, now I'm dead. So, Javier plays Primeval Titan, is going to get 2 lands. Primeval Titan can't block Mirror Crusader, so he's going to get in for 8, it looks like.
This is the kind of situation where Glimmer Post can be really powerful. I guess Inkmoth is a great blocker for Mirror Crusader, but over the next 2 turns, he could potentially gain 12 life.
Yeah. But he goes for double Ink Moth, which is interesting. I'm not entirely convinced of that. I think that you have Glimmer Post in your deck. You might as well play them.
Right. I guess on one hand, it is very unlikely that he dies next turn.
Yeah.
At which point, because the Ink Moths come into play tapped, and the life gain of Glimmer Post coming into play untapped.
Oh dear.
Oh wow.
Oh dear.
That's actually 20, isn't it?
That's
18? 16?
16. 4/4 plus 4/4 double strike. Yeah, that's 16.
So it turns out that the Ink Moths were actually a really good thing to search for, because
Yeah.
if he hadn't gotten them, he'd be in some serious
Angelic
trouble.
Destiny, not a very common card in Humans deck lists nowadays.
Yeah, it was really popular for about a week, but it really phased out when Vapor Snag became a staple of the format.
Yeah. But Javier all the way to 1.
Especially with people playing Thalia in their main deck and shorting lands, 22, 23, 24 at most lands in the Humans deck. It's really difficult to cast Destiny, especially when you have Thalia in play.
Right. Yeah, like, you have to pick between, like, Thalia and more dudes, or, like, swords and Mirror Crusaders.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really, like, curve Thalia into sword, which is a problem.
Right.
But the point of playing Thalia is that you stop them from curving into sword, which is very, very good against you when all of your creatures are white.
Yeah. I think Destiny's also probably in a pretty good spot right now, since it's very powerful against Wolf Run. But also, if you keep up to date on like Brad and Jerry's articles in Star City, they're always playing Ancient Grudges and crazy things in their main deck to get rid of the target swords to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. So like enchantment-based pump is actually awesome, and that's like part of why people really picked up on Spectral Flight, right?
Yeah. Actually, I was playing Spectre Flight at GP Orlando. It was a blast. There's so many games where you don't think you can win. You have a Geist Saint Trap versus your opponent's army of pumped humans, and you just draw the Spectre Flight and attack for 1,000,000.
Whee! Take 8, you're dead.
Oh wow, this seems really good. He can actually gain 12 life in 1 turn because he has 2 Primeval Titans.
Oh, wow. And he can block for the next 4 turns, which is more than enough.
Definitely.
Brian's Kingdom for an Apostle's Blessing here.
Protection from artifacts would be something else.
Yeah. Man, you nearly got protection from blued earlier by your round 1 Infect opponent.
Oh yeah?
Well, and then he just didn't cast Artful Dodge.
Right. Yeah, he had that Apostle's Blessing in his hand since I had Probe, I knew, and I was terrified of what he could do with it. What's really interesting here is that Javier does have 2 Ink Moths and the Copperline Gorge open, so that if Brian does have some instant speed removal, like a Divine Offering, Javier has a backup plan.
Yeah, he can, like, activate off of Copperline Gorge, and then if he, like, Divine Offerings 1, then, like, tap it for mana, activate the other one, block. So he's going to need 2 instant speed removal spells to kill Javier here.
Definitely. I really like what R&D's been doing recently, because there's so many times when it's relevant to have an instant speed removal spell, like Divine Offering or Galvanic Blast.
Yeah.
But all of the creatures are either like lands where you can't kill them on your turn, or Undying creatures, so you're forced to play things like Revoke or Pillar of Flame.
Yeah.
You normally would be worse in most
Like, you
formats.
actually have to commit to, like, the upsides and downsides of, like, differently speeded removal.
Right.
And all of the creatures are awesome.
Yeah.
So do we see Fiend Hunter here? Silverblade Paladin. Okay, so they get the hookup. Mirror Crusader already has Double Strike, but the pairing ensures that Silverblade is a 2/2 Double Striker.
Even though Brian has the Glacier Fortress untapped, which is normally pretty scary from a Delver deck,
Yeah.
it's very, very unlikely that Brian's playing Vapor Snag in this deck. So I can't imagine that a Wolf Run wouldn't be lethal here for Javier.
Yeah. He has what looks like 9 mana to activate along with Wolf Run.
Yeah.
So you can Wolf Run for 9.
Blocking 1 Primeval Titan, you'll still take 15 from the other.
Yeah. And all that trample damage. That's definitely lethal. Gets the other Glimmer Posts just for value.
Insurance. And Javier won game 1, so if he decides to go all in here, it looks like it could be the match.
Yeah. Yeah, no Glimmer Post. Instead decides for... Oh yeah, Glimmer Post and the other Wolf Run and a red-green duel.
So it looks like Brian drew his sideboard card, Angelic Destiny.
Yeah.
But
it did a lot.
Right, it did do a lot, and even so, I think this is a pretty classic example of what happens when Humans matches up against Wolf Run. Brian didn't have the 1-drop, which obviously would have mattered since Javier stabilized at 1 life.
Yeah.
And
like even a Doom Traveler would have...
Any 1-drop would have been huge. So even with your sideboard cards, you really need to have the perfect hand to beat Wolf Run with the Human deck.
Yeah.
And that's part of why Wolf Run's so powerful when everyone's running around with 2/1 hastes and 4 mana for 2 2/2s.
Yeah, getting real cute.
Yeah. Your opponents are casting a red-green Moan of the Unhallowed when you're casting Primeval Titan, so...
Yeah. Bit of a difference.
Yeah.
So Javier's just like, what can I lose to here? He comes up with... I can lose to... nothing. Wolf Run.
You know, this... I'm not sure...
For 6?
I know Javier has a Slagstorm in his hand.
Oh, had another Destiny in his hand. Brian had another Destiny in his hand. But yeah, Javier had another Slagstorm. What were you saying?
Oh, well, Javier has the Slagstorm, so if he somehow survives, he can still Slagstorm. Second main phase.
Yeah.
So you can see GP champion Bronson in the background.
With his stylish hat.
Indeed.
Welcome back. Are we going to get another match? Well, that match ended pretty quickly, so
yep.
We'll be able to bring you all another match. So tell us more about sort of how this deck came about. I know that it isn't entirely your work, or so the rumor mill says.
Right, so it's Nick Spagnolo brew, and I think he played Architect a while back. He's Architect now, Worm Coils. He had some feature matches of deck tech. He might have just missed top 8, like 9th. Yeah. But he brought up the deck to me again. I was like, oh yeah, it seems really good. And I put it together on Moto and saw that there was like 8 images or 8 clones in the deck. And at first, I was like, it seems really stainy. I think 8 clones is too many. I'm going to have a lot of hands that don't do much.
Yeah.
But I very quickly realized that 8 clones is actually just insane when everyone's playing Undying Creatures and Primeval Titans.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's basically almost entirely Nick's deck. I did a lot of testing. We changed a lot of cards and like talked back and forth. But after all of the testing, we actually reverted back almost exactly to his original list.
Wow. So what did you guys go through that you didn't like?
Well, Merfolk Looter just seems like pretty low impact cards. That was one of the first cards to go when we were testing.
Yeah.
The only problem with the deck, like if you curve out Blue Creature, Grand Architect, Wormcoil Engine, you're almost never going to lose.
Right.
But what if you don't draw the Wormcoil Engine?
Yeah.
So we played Forbidden Alchemy for a while, but more often than not, you would Alchemy just for a land. At some point we realized that we should probably just play like extra lands instead of the Alchemy. And eventually we actually came back to Merfolk Looter because it not only makes the deck more consistent by drawing a card and discarding, but also taps to activate to Grand Architect.
Yeah.
So it ended up being a great spot. I played the Devastation Tide in the deck, which was largely untested, and by largely I mean entirely untested. I expected it to be really cool because you can have these situations where you have 3 blue creatures in play and 5 lands, and float a Wormcoil Engine and cast Upheaval. Yeah. But it turns out the card's actually been terrible for me today. So
definitely cutting that one.
Yeah, would not play that again.
Anything that you felt like you wanted?
The deck list is pretty tight because you're playing almost 4 of all the good blue creatures that are in Standard.
Yeah.
And there aren't really a ton of great artifacts that you have access to other than Wormcoil, Batterskull, and the swords. There's originally some swords in the main, but they weren't high enough impact. They weren't good enough mana sinks when you have 100 mana.
Right.
And Batterskull is fine, but it's just worse than Wormcoil Engine. So
yeah.
It's
did you consider any planeswalkers?
No, that was never really a consideration because you're pretty light on lands, and so you want to have as many blue creatures and artifacts as possible. And so anything that isn't a blue creature or an artifact or card draw is really diluting the whole synergy of the deck, I think.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. What about the other colors? You're largely a mono blue deck, so how'd you come to Drowned Catacombs over anything else?
The first thing I saw in the deck was that it was a mono blue deck with 4 black sources, and my head just exploded because there's no reason to splash that. Right. But there's 2 surgical extractions and a dismember on the board, so you can randomly lose less life when you cast them.
Yeah.
But the more I thought about it, I tried. Like I looked through Gatherer, every standard legal card. There's really just nothing else you want to play. You're not going to play Moorland Haunt because you're playing Buried Ruin.
Right. You never want to remove your dudes.
Right. You never want to remove anything really. Like the mana base can't really. You splash red, but there's not really anything there. You know.
Yeah. And you like don't want to play like both sides of an Ancient Grudge like you would in Modern. It's just like too many things that want an island.
All the best cards that you would splash for are actually colorless lands. So you'd be stretching your mana base a lot to play like Desolate Lighthouse or Moorland Haunt, any of those cards. So
because like you'd have to like find ways to get mountains, and then you'd have to like get lighthouses, and like you really just want to always cast Ponder, and all your Buried Ruins and Ghost Quarters are already awesome.
Yeah.
Like those, I assume you just like don't want to cut any of those 6, and that they're like some of the best cards in the deck.
Definitely, yeah. We started with just the 4 Buried Ruin in the main, and then I pretty quickly added a Ghost Quarter, and then there's a second Ghost Quarter on the board. Once I played against my first Primeval Titan deck and copied a Primeval Titan with like an image, and I couldn't kill both of his Wolf Runs, so he killed my image when he untapped.
Yeah.
And then so there's a second Ghost Quarter on the board, and then it very quickly moved to the main deck.
Right.
Oh, one thing that I was curious about. Do you have any more questions, or
no,
change the topic? Okay. So the Wolfier Silverheart.
Yeah.
I would say that was the number 1 sleeper for the set by far.
Yeah.
Like everyone said, yeah, it'll probably be like strong in block. You know,
which it was.
Right. It might be good after Vapor Snag rotates from standard. Expecting it to be like $3 to $4 card, but it's sold out at $8 on Star City now.
Yeah.
It completely dominated the block format for the Pro Tour. But I haven't seen a ton of it today. So what do you think about the Silverheart and Standard?
So it's picked up. Like when we've been watching, there have been Nyapod decks with like 2 of it. There was a Wolf Run Ramp deck with 1 of it. There were. I haven't seen a 4 Wolfier Silverheart deck yet.
Definitely.
But it went from 1 in the winning list last week to multiple different archetypes playing 2 of it.
Yeah.
Like there was a green red aggro deck with 2 of it. There was a Nyapod deck with 2 of it. I think that it'll be a week or 2 before people realize that you can actually just make a deck that's like green red, mana, dude, like 8 birds and elves, or like if you want to go all 12, you could add Avacyn's Pilgrims.
Definitely.
And then just like jam a Wolfier Silverheart on turn 3, hook it up with a bird, and like your bird becomes an angel. He's an actual 4/5 flyer. And then if you want to, you can like play Garruk Primal Hunter next turn, and then draw 8 cards.
Yeah, he's pretty cool. Well, at the same time, the format's pretty cyclical. Like all standard formats are pretty cyclical. Yeah. So as soon as people start picking up more Wolfier Silverhearts and making their red-green decks more combo-based instead of linear, then the Vapor Snag decks might pick up in popularity again.
Yeah, like if your card values become too polarized, like you have a bunch of chaff that gets you into your like 12 good cards, like Mythic style, then your deck becomes very vulnerable to stuff like Mana Leak.
And there aren't manlands in this format to take advantage of all the birds when you run out of gas. Although Township's pretty strong.
I guess Gavany Township is sort of the card to do that, or Wolf Run, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean,